Hey guys, happy Monday. So, no car share today, but in a nice static environment just to talk to you. I have received some really interesting questions from some clients when we talked about lifestyle changes. One being carbohydrates. Are they all bad? And how do I avoid them? So, first thing, I feel like people are confused about what a carbohydrate is at molecular level as well as in general. So, I'm gonna just talk about that. And then another question that comes up a lot is about cholesterol. It seems to be a very controversial topic online. I even had a message from my old doctor in the UK that said that, oh, then, the statin scam about cholesterol. I'm going to talk about that too. So, um, carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are molecular structures and they are macronutrients that come with calories. 1 gram of carbs has 4 calories. I think it's really important to understand that a carb is not a carb is not a carb, and what carbs are and which umbrella system food classify as carbs. But also, I think it's really important to understand that we do not eat a macronutrient. We eat food that has a bigger amount of those macronutrients. So, for example, if we eat, when we say we eat a carb can be even a broccoli has a high amount of carbs, but also has fat and also has protein, amino acids in lower levels, not a complete protein, so it doesn't have all the essential amino acids, but it has amino acids. So the broccoli is a compilation of macronutrients, but the biggest macronutrient in the broccoli would be the carbohydrates. So again, broccoli are really healthy, right? And likewise, fats. If we talk about nuts and seeds will come with, by the way, broccoli, of course, has the fiber, which is not a macronutrient. It doesn't have calories and it's not digested by us, but digested by our microbiome. So that's really to take into consideration. Same with nuts. Nuts has got a higher amount of fats. It doesn't actually have a very big amount at all, really minimal, statistically relevant carbohydrate. Fat, protein, it has protein and it has fiber. So again, we are not eating a macronutrient, but of course that's a high amount of fat. And when it comes to animal products, the flesh of an animal, there is no carbohydrates. Again, like first, no carbohydrates. Flesh is mostly amino acids and fat. So those things are really important to understand because I feel like we've been taught to classify food as macronutrients, but it's much more complex than that. There is also a dynamic of macronutrients working together with the micronutrients when it comes to our body processing them and dealing with them. So that's another important thing to take into consideration, which is why a food is not a food is not a food, a carb is not a carb is not a carb, a protein is not a protein is not a protein. Really, in a way, actually, protein is probably the most straightforward that way because amino acids are amino acids. A fat is not a fat is not a fat. When it comes to fat, if you want to think about the isolated fat, you think about oils. Oils have been basically extracted from a plant or from something else. And fat, like the fat cells of an animal, like lard from a pig, and has been made into a single macronutrient, which is fat. And that's really the only thing they have. So they would have 9 calories per gram. I hope I'm explaining this well. But what I mean is when we eat whole food, we're eating an array of macronutrients. So when it comes to carbohydrates, the reason I say a carb is not a carb is not a carb, because if you're going out and you're having Subway, for example, and you have the bread, which is hyper-processed bread with whatever inside, that bread is mostly refined grain. So that would be a grain initially that was processed, refined highly, and then it made flour. And with that flour, which is highly blanched, which means it's like made white so that it is stable for the shelf, it would be then passed on. So it lasts forever. And that carb will not have the same impact in your body as, say, you eating a whole brown rice or quinoa or buckwheat or millet or whatever, like a whole ancient grain, if you want to call it that, a whole grain. The impact on the body is very different. Under the umbrella of carbs, we have vegetables, we have fruit, and again, their impact on our body is different. So talking about avoiding carbs, it's such a genetic thing that people really struggle. Like even potatoes and sweet potatoes get swept under that bad umbrella. And I made a shepherd's pie for one of my clients, and he was like, sure, but am I allowed to eat sweet potatoes? I'm like, of course you're allowed to eat sweet potatoes. They are full of vitamin A and beta carotene. I mean, you need those things. Like this is like nutrients galore. Of course you do. And you can eat them. And this is, oh, but I thought carbs were bad for me. Oh my. And then when the conversation started with the carbohydrates, and this is online, this is something that comes up all the time. So it's really, really important to tackle this conversation and talk about it so that we do not get lost in the noise. So that's one thing I wanted to clarify. I hope this makes sense. Now, when I say the protein is a little more straightforward, is because when we talk about protein, we're talking about the amino acids. For example, animal products. But again, animal products that have fat and amino acids is not just amino acids. So again, we're not eating a single macronutrient really. So I think it's really nice to know these things because it can make us feel a little bit more comfortable. So when it comes to carbohydrates, a diet that is healthy, actually, when we say high carb, it's a diet that is plentiful of plants. So would have vegetables and fruit, herbs, microgreens, sprouted everything. By the way, when it comes to pulses are high carb, but also high protein. So again, you're not eating the macronutrients, but you have the group of them. And so you are having this very plant-rich diet, which comes with the fiber, which we did not digest in our tract per se, but our microbiome uses it and digests it as food. So the more diverse plant kingdom we explore for our food, the more diverse microbiome, good bacteria in the microbiome we will have. So again, it's very important. Now, for those of you who have digestive issues, there is a way to do this, implementing and adding food very, very slowly. That generally comes with taking out everything first and then slowly adding one thing at a time. In the word of Dr. Will Bolzowitz, even if you have to start with one chickpea, just start. So some people cannot even tolerate 2 chickpeas, right? So you start with 1. So guys, it's really important to understand where you at, which is why working with a nutritionist or registered dietitian is so important, because we don't want to get sick, and we don't also want to make people feel unwell and then say, oh, it's the diet, it's the carbs, it's the pulses. It's not that, it's our digestive system, how we react to things. I'll give you an example. I've noticed that when I am ovulating, in my ovulatory phase in my cycle, I cannot tolerate soy. And that's probably because my estrogen goes up through the ovulation period, and adding on estrogen-rich food like isoflavone in soy maybe just stresses my microbiome. So I've noticed that during that period, I don't have it. If I don't have it, it's better. And then I start again and I can completely be fine digesting it. So those are observational. Of course, this is just anecdotal. It's my experience, but I've noticed that. I'm like, that's interesting. So you need to notice what works for you. If you're a woman, start learning about food through your cycle. It's a beautiful, beautiful topic. I've actually covered this, and superficially, but I covered this in an episode of my podcast, the very early episodes with my friend, coach, Adele Smith, who actually really is wonderful at sharing information. She has a beautiful upbeat attitude, and she really talks about eating for your cycle time. So I would check that episode out if I were you. Now the other question that came up was cholesterol. You probably heard cholesterol is not bad. If you have high cholesterol, that doesn't mean you have cardiovascular disease. Okay, so studies that are randomized controlled studies all have the same consensus since forever. High cholesterol levels are linked to cardiovascular disease. Now, in that context, we don't only look at LDL. LDL alone, it can be an indicator, but it's not causal. It's not going to give us heart disease. However, since the 80s, we've been actually talking about this, although only now people are talking about it really in the social media space. We look at ApoB, so lipoprotein. The lipoprotein is like the taxi that carries the LDL or the HDL. It carries the actual cholesterol. Those cars, those vehicles for transporting the cholesterol, that is an indicator of a higher chance of getting higher an event, a cardiovascular event, like a heart attack or whatever. So when you look at studies, when you look at people, you have to see, look, this is what's happening. Like someone with a high LDL may have very low ApoB, and so their risk of cardiovascular disease is lower. And they might naturally just have high cholesterol, and with a low ApoB, they might be fine. But people generally that have high cholesterol, like high LDL cholesterol, also have ApoB that is high and raised. That's a pretty good indicator of a possible cardiovascular event. So understanding those things is really, really important for health. And unfortunately, I've noticed, because I always have my clients do blood work, that unless you tell the doctors to check ApoB, they don't even really know what it is. It's shocking for me. And I don't think it's just in Portugal, because I have some clients in the UK where I had to say, make sure they check your ApoB because it's not standard. And so it is interesting, right? Same thing with glucose. They check the fasting glucose, but not everybody checks A1C. Not everybody checks your fasting insulin, which is also a great indicator of insulin resistance and diabetes. So there's a ratio that you can calculate online with an app. So you don't even have to do the calculation yourself. But those things are important to understand, because I feel like everybody gets lost into these conversations. And this has become even more problematic since the whole carnivore thing started, because you have these influencers who sure maybe went to medical school, but we know that not all doctors understand nutrition or understand studies. They don't look at studies or cherry pick studies, and we all biased at the end. So if we don't recognize our bias, and we think that we are not biased when we look at material that goes towards our bias, we can be really misleading. And I think that's not really serving people we work with. So I had to really kind of step back and see that, because one thing I noticed when I was studying at EI, even the things that my lecturer was saying, sometimes I didn't agree with, and they made sense, and he had studies that proved so. But when I looked at the majority of studies that are out there, the consensus was very opposite to what he was saying. Now, I'm not discrediting what he's saying, because there are times and there are circumstances, but I think we have to look at majority, because again, you look at population, you look at majority of people and how they're doing. So you have to be really smart, and you have to think about these things. And it's very personal as well. Like, we're very unique, even if we have the same biology, and we are very unique, right? So there are people that really can't eat plants. So what do you do with them, right? Because the digestive system is a mess. And until you get them to a point where they can have them, you have to just compromise somewhere. And as a vegan, this is really hard for me to say, because I don't want animals to be killed and slaughtered. And I hope we can find ways that they can have a diet that can support them without having to have animals in them. But some people really can't. They struggle. But does that mean that a carnivore diet is better for your immune system? No. Is it better for your digestive system? No. It's just that it could be, for some people, that seems to be the interim solution, while they should be fixing their problem, but they don't fix it if they only stay on that diet and think that's the diet that will heal and cure them all. Eventually, down the line, there will be another problem coming. The other thing that people always say, and this is from people like Saladino and Peterson and all these guys, or Sean Baker, they're clowns. I'm sorry, I really don't like. I shouldn't say these things because it's very personal. But sometimes I'm like, they have massive platforms and they're so misleading, and it upsets me that they mislead people and they get them hurt long term. But when they say, look at this, when people have cardiovascular events, you can see that the majority of them have very low cholesterol. They never show the studies that say that when you have an acute episode, like a heart attack, or when there is a disease involved, like cancer, the cholesterol will go down for people. So in that particular moment with the test, the cholesterol might be low while they have their heart attack or they have cancer and they test it and so on. Any disease actually will show low cholesterol, but it's only because they're sick already, and the body will, the whatever disease, it's going to use cholesterol to propagate. Before that, they probably have a trend of high LDL. So again, is it, they don't show this, so people are confused about this, and I think it's really, really unfair that we can get people sick. Now I will find the studies that show this, and post them under this video, because I think you need to go and check them yourself and investigate yourself. But isn't it interesting? These people are not showing these studies, and so it's a problem. It's problematic. So those were the two questions that came to me. I hope this clarifies it a little bit more. Of course, I am not sharing it as, in details. Like, I'm not showing you the studies on here. I am just sharing the summary, but I will put the links to the studies so you can check them yourself. Because ultimately, you have to be able to do your own research. And I know that we don't have time. Time is very sparse, but if you look at studies and you see it's randomized, controlled, that it's got, and they also, if it's even if it's funded by the industry, by the way, we don't discredit it, we look at it. But what is nice is that they do, sometimes they do summaries, so they do they summarize the outcome of many studies that they put together. And studies are a pack of studies that come from different sources, and they show the same outcome. Sometimes you can also look at those, and you can see that there's studies perhaps that are funded by industry but show not what the industry would love. Those are great, they are possibly more unbiased. But we look at majority, right? We look at majority of things, and majority of studies that will show probably what the mainstream doesn't want us to know, they would probably not be funded by industry. But okay, we don't just want to discard the studies just because they're funded by industry, because it's a shortcoming. We want to make sure that we're aware of it, and then we compare to other studies that are not funded by industry and see what the parallels are. So that's why it's really important to do your research, or follow someone that actually has the studies in front of you. Like Simon Hill is really good at sharing that. I think that actually is very helpful, and it truly helped. Actually, he just shared something this morning about soy, and I had a question on Saturday at lunch about, but isn't soy bad for your hormones? And I saw this going online before, and when somebody mentioned the study. Now in that study, people were having 12 times the amount of soy that anybody should have. So the men started having moobs, I believe, but nobody has that amount of soy in their life, in a normal circumstance, every day. Like, no way. So that was misleading and a bit of a cheeky one. But all the studies show that isoflavones and phytoestrogen are helpful, especially even for women who had breast cancer episodes. Those isoflavone, those phytoestrogens are helpful for preventing another episode of cancer, or preventing cancer in the first place, especially with the breast, and even if they are estrogen sensitive. So again, the majority of studies show that, so I think we can just rest easy. I know how it feels to have these concerns, because I was concerned about soy for a very long time, and actually used to say maybe it's better not to drink soy milk because you can have quite a big amount. But even if you drink a liter a day, it's still not enough to make you worry. Also, when we drink milk, it's not like a liter of soybeans. It's actually mixed with water, and there's generally like a very high amount is 9%. So I think we're fine. So those are the things I wanted to share. I think maybe they go a little bit overlooked, and they're concerning, and I understand the concern. I really appreciate it, but we have to become a little bit more, mindful about it. We'll actually add another one to this. When people ask me about animal products, can we be healthy with animal products? You know what? It pains me to say this because I'm vegan, and so I'm not just plant-based, but actually care for the animals. But the truth is, studies show that certain amount of fish, so like a Mediterranean diet, fish, no to little red meat, though fish or eggs even, can actually be conducive to a healthy diet, because in these populations, or the way that the Mediterranean diet, the original one, should be done, is with mostly plants with these added animal products. They even have dairy. As a vegan, I don't agree, because if we have the option, why hurt an animal? So that's my, obviously, that's my vegan topic, my vegan concern, my vegan logic. But if I have to look at science, yes, you can have some fish, egg, and dairy, and you're fine. Dairy, I'm not a big fan of. And I know that we can say that science shows that some dairy is even good for people. To me, it makes no sense that we are eating dairy when we are not drinking our mother's milk. That doesn't make sense, but it's not a scientific argument. So in the sense of science, some dairy has been shown to actually be beneficial, and then in the ethical and logical side, I don't think it makes sense, if you know what I mean. Can we live without dairy? Yes. Can we be super healthy without dairy? Yes. The majority of people on the earth are actually dairy intolerant anyway. So to me, again, and this is not a scientific argument, so I get it. But I'm trying to be human about this. I'm trying to tell you, this is my opinion, my view as a vegan, because I care for the animals. But when I look at science, I have to be honest and say, this is what the science shows. It doesn't fit my bias. But this is why it's very important to understand that bias is present, I think, for everyone. And that if we are out there thinking, I'm sharing this information without bias, sometimes we're lying to ourselves. So I wanted to share this because I feel like it's more honest this way. So yeah, guys, if you have any questions, share. And if you have any input, share. Please be kind, civilized, and constructive in the comments. Even if you have if you have opposite feedback, if you have different opinions, try to detach from the emotions. Try to just see, when we talk about stuff, try to just see like I'm seeing, like emotionally, yeah, I want everybody to go vegan. It makes no sense to eat animals. Emotionally, to me, the way that what we're doing to the planet with animal agriculture and monoculture makes no sense. And I think in that sense, monoculture, even, I don't, like, there's no freaking way that you need to have monoculture to feed the planet. We're not feeding the planet, because most of the food we're doing monoculture with, by the way, like soy, especially with GMOs like soy and corn, doesn't even go to humans. It goes to animals that are farmed. Like, you know what I mean? I don't think there's an argument there that people can really make, but they still do. But of course, if I have to emotionally talk about this, yeah, I'm vegan, and I'm like, why are we hurting sentient beings? It's like this. It's like tomorrow saying, we don't have any animals left. Let's eat humans, and we're gonna select the humans that we think we can do without. What? So those are the things that I think might come up. This world is that crazy that this argument might come up. I don't even know. But okay, but emotionally speaking, I'm like, and I don't even care if one day that comes up and science says that's okay. Because actually, if you think about it, my arm, well, this is flesh and as protein, as fats. So technically somebody could eat it and live on it, but it's gross, and cannibalism is immoral and crazy. And there are tribes somewhere in the world that do the shit. So I think we need to understand that sometimes just because science shows something, that doesn't necessarily make it right. I think that's really important to also think about. So yeah, keeping the humanity in this conversation. So anyway, if you want to share anecdotes, if you want to share your story, if you want to share studies you've seen, please do so. I definitely can say this. The majority of studies show that a diet that is plant-based, whether it's fully plant-based or partially, like a Mediterranean diet, but made with non-processed food, so whole food, which I mentioned before, the fruit, the nuts, the seeds, the veg, the grains, then it shows to be healthier. And there's really no arguing about that than a standard Western diet, which is mostly processed food. And it's not even Western anymore. A diet where any country where you see a McDonald's, you know there is a problem, period. So guys, I hope this was helpful. And again, share kindly and be respectful. And I'll see you soon.